Hello everyone, welcome to episode 10 of Let's Design Diablo. Episode 10, that's a little bit of a milestone, so I'm really happy to have come this far with it. I'm really enjoying it and hope to continue it long into the future. This particular video is focused on some detail in the globe and texture area behind the at the bottom, in the bottom bar. And let's just get into it because we're picking up on the momentum that we built last time in having figured out what that texture is going to look like and how the angel and the demon are going to come sort of out from behind there. This is where we left off, and we can see that I think I did a tiny bit off stream, and I usually don't do anything off stream, but in between the end of the last video and this one, I used that glow from the Diablo 3 logo underneath the health globe and underneath the mana globe. Now, and then I used a hue filter to change the color of those glows. So, I think it adds a nice, and that's what we're seeing underneath the health and the mana globe here. I think it adds a nice effect. It draws the eye out and away from the globes just a little bit and gives a sense that they're emitting some kind of light, that the color, the very prominent color that exists within them is not exclusive to within that circle. It's sort of emitting a light and interacting with the objects around it. That's why I think that it works to use those colors a little bit outside of the globes themselves. And we'll see the extent to which that is appropriate. And, you know, we don't want to do it too much. Definitely don't want to overdo it. But I do like this. For some reason, this just appears to me to be a nice way to extend that color out a little bit. So we're working on the texture on the bottom right now just to see if, as we do on the left, have a tiny bit of red in the bottom left over top of the rock texture. There's a hue, just a tiny bit of a hint of a red color, and fooling around with having a tiny bit of a hint of a blue or a purple color in the bottom right. And right now on stream, I'm just talking about how I like the way that it looks on the left for the demon to be coming up and out of that background. And we're sort of thinking about how we could simulate that a little bit more on the right with the angel. Even though she's flat on, it doesn't mean that we can't edit her a little bit to make it look like she's coming out of the background a little bit more. So I think what we do here is just working on the shadow a bit. And at some point, I'm not sure if this is it, we paint on top of her layer a little bit in areas where some shadow already is, and just accentuate that to give it more dimension. I think for right now, we're just going to be working on the shadow behind the globe itself, though. But in order to get that right, we need to mask that layer properly. So that's why you saw that selection come up in the shape of the globe. So when we paint, we're painting everywhere but where that selection was. So it'll just naturally go. It won't overlap with the globe. It'll just go onto her. So yeah, just working on it to see what, whether and how we want her to appear to be coming up and out of the background rock texture, just like it's sort of naturally happening for the demon on the left. But for her, it's not. We have to sort of make it work. It's not really working that well for some reason. So eventually I think I abandoned this pursuit and just go with the idea of accentuating some of her dimension, just like he is appearing to come from the background to the foreground. We try to translate that and essentially just like fake it a little bit with her on the right. I forget exactly when we come to that conclusion. But so right now we're looking at the texture and just trying to get that right. We'll also add, coming up at some point, a shadow behind the wing area on her side, and that shadow is cast onto the rock texture behind her, and that looks really nice when we add that. And so yeah, we're thinking about whether to put a hue adjustment onto the rock texture behind her to see if we want to carry through some of that color from the mana globe onto that texture. I think not really. If we do, it's a very small amount. Just a hint of it, if any. Because again, we really want the player's eye to be focused on the mana and health globe itself and not be drawn too much to the background texture. Basically want that to be that, I'm not sure the peripheral vision is the right word, but you know, when the eye focuses on one area of the screen, it sees a little bit of detail in the areas around it. So we don't want to be, oh, here comes the shadow onto the background from the wing. And I think that looks pretty nice. And the way we're trying to do that shadow, it's an experiment sort of, but we try to have it curve up in a way in sort of a C shape, because the wing, if the wing is curving up and toward the camera, then the shadow could probably be, it would be realistic to think that the shadow would extend up and away away from the middle of the screen and towards the right hand side. So the top of the shadow is extended out a little bit more. I was kind of hoping that would be a cooler effect than it ended up being, but it's still not bad. I think it still looks good. Anyway, back to what I was saying before, when the eye is focused on any particular part of the screen or design or just like in life, you have your peripheral vision that's on the very edges of what you can see. But when you're looking at focus on one thing on a screen, you do have a sense of what is happening on the edges of whatever it is you're focused on. Like if I'm looking at the mana globe, I can sort of see the texture in the background on the bottom right bar. So that texture, you don't want to draw that out. You don't want that to be too prominent, because then it starts to compete with what you're looking at. But you want to be really careful not for it to, even though you're not looking at it directly, you don't want the eye to pick up on any kind of duplication of texture or symmetry that's not natural, because that really jumps out and is distracting. So when we were messing with the texture a few minutes ago, that's why, to make sure that it looks natural. And I think it does. I think it's nice. I think that the left-hand side is looking a little bit more cohesive than the right, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, it's not in a bad place right now. There's a lot of empty area. We don't really know how the interface is going to come together. There's a lot of obviously important information that needs to be presented to the player, other than just their mana and health. So eventually down the road, we'll need to account for that, especially skill icons. We'll bring those back. I'm not sure if it's in this stream or the next, but those come back. We work those in, and we figure out sort of what's going on in that middle area. I'm really trying at this point to catch the YouTube videos up to where the design currently is. So I haven't been streaming the last few days for that reason, because I really wanted to do a stream and then same day or next day do the commentary voiceover for YouTube and then post it so that the YouTube videos are in sync with the stream. But the way it worked when I just started doing this was that I got way out ahead with the stream, which made sense because I didn't really know what the process was going to be yet. But now that I have a sense for that, I want them to be closer in sync. So I'm taking a little bit of a break from streaming to catch up on these videos. I think maybe there's 5 more after this or something along those lines. We're not even up to the point where the design was at when I posted this on Reddit, so we have some work to do. Thinking about how prominent we want those glows underneath the globes to be. If you notice on the mana globe, that glow underneath it sort of coming up in front of the mana globe itself. I'm not sure we want that, or if we do want it, we want to do it on both sides. So that's what I'm working on now. See, like, do we want... I don't really think that makes a lot of sense. So I think what we end up doing is bringing the globes themselves in front, and those glows a little bit sort of recede into the background a bit. What I should probably be doing is just taking a brush that's the approximate size of the globe with 100% opacity and near total hardness all the way up, and just clicking in the center of the globe and that and erasing the part of the glow that exists there. Oh, also made a small modification to the way the health globe looks here. It has always had less sort of dimension and I think visual interest than the mana globe for some reason. Not really sure why that is. It just appears more illustrated and more like flat, whereas the mana globe has a lot of, I think, interesting dimension to it. So I'm trying to create that on the left hand side with the health globe as well. I think it's somewhat successful. Yeah, making that center part a little bit darker. There was basically another health globe layered on top, which was making the whole thing brighter and making it, I think, look a little bit more two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional. If you notice on the mana globe, it's sort of dark around the bottom edges, and it's the opposite on the health, and it's bright in the center. The health globe is sort of the opposite. It's dark in the center and bright around the outside. So I think what we try to do here is just make them a little bit more. I'm not actually sure even how much more I work on that. I think I leave it there for now, but that might be something we want to address in the future. And I'm wondering why I can't select the skill icon. And where is it? We find it eventually. We're going to start to bring it back. There it is. Okay, how does that fit in? I think I'm talking through a possibility where we have like a rock jutting out at a 45-degree angle that holds the skill icon. Still playing with this idea of using that frame. I always felt like the frame was a little bit boring, but it's a safe option. We don't end up going with it exactly, if I recall, but it is something we're considering. And just thinking about how the bar and that area interact. Does the bar fade out and then there's this frame, or is the frame like part of the bar? And we're also right there making the skill icon kind of fit better in that space. It's not bad. I think it's the safest choice, but since we're just messing around, why go with the safest choice? Let's take some risks. I mean, that's what D1 and D2 took a lot of risks that paid off. So we do end up going with something a bit more visually interesting. But it's not bad. I mean, you could see it's like it works, and I think the game could use something simple like that. And really, D1 and D2 for the skill icon areas, it was very clear. Like those were just rectangles or squares. Even it was not anything fancy. But I do think this design needs to be an evolution of that. Of the aesthetic in D1 and D2, which means we keep a lot, but we also make improvements or updates to make it look more modern where we can. And I've had some comments that the skill icons themselves are not really all that modern looking in this design, and I'm totally right, they're not. But those little bits of artwork are not really what I'm like. That's going to change based on the skill that you're using. So I'm not going to commit too much energy at this phase to making those exactly right. So I'm trying to figure out like why this isn't quite centered. I mean, I think it looks centered, but when you actually measure it, it's not. And the reason I think what we conclude is the reason it's not centered, or the reason why there's more space. Well, I don't know. It looks pretty good to me now, so I'm not really. I guess there's more space to the left of the demon, between the demon and the skill icon on the left than there is between the angel and the skill icon on the right. And so I was thinking like, that means that means the whole thing is off. And it does actually appear that it's not quite right. Like the whole thing should shift to the right a little bit based on what we're seeing. But if we did that, there'd be even less space between the angel and the icon on the right, and even more between the demon and the icon on the left, which is what we're trying to correct. So if we made it, quote, right, we would actually make it look worse, which is odd. But I think the reason for that is, I don't know, mysterious. But maybe it's because I'm not sure I even measure this, but like the angel is wider. The space between the right-hand side of the mana globe on the right and the end of the angel on the right is wider than that space is on the left. So sort of a making up for that by making the whole thing shifted a tiny bit. I think imperceptibly. I mean, you don't look at that. To me, I don't look at that and say that it looks off-center. It looks right to me. And a lot of times when you're working with a design that is intentionally a little bit asymmetrical, you have to make things imperfect to make them look right. Our eyes are not. Don't give our brains always the correct information. And even though this is a little bit off, it looks more right than it would look if it was actually perfectly centered. So I decide maybe it's something we correct in the future, or that like it's just not something the game could. I don't know. So we're not even making a game, but if it had to be fixed, it could. But for now, because it looks right, we're gonna go with it. Probably if a developer was involved, they would not be happy trying to code a game where like the center isn't actually the center. But for now, since we don't have that, we're just gonna go with it, and it's fairly easily fixed in the future. It would be, I don't know, probably a 20-minute endeavor to correct that. But I don't want to correct it and make it look off. So if it looks good, we're just going to keep it. Yeah, so like it looks somewhat resolved that way. I'm not excited by those icons, not by mostly the frame and the way the icons are designed, but hey, like it could work. You know, this is what a design would look like if maybe you did something cooler, took a risk, and I don't know, your boss's boss, who is not a designer, looks at it and goes, oh, that's too much. We need to bring it back down. This is probably where it would land, but we don't have that. That's the whole fun of this project. So I'm just going to go as far as I can with it, make it look as awesome as we think it can look, and not worry about what like a corporate type would think about whether or not it would work. Too many of those types of opinions. It's important, definitely, like to have that opinion, but maybe what has contributed to the state that Blizzard is at right now, and this is no revelation, everyone is saying this, is that it's just a bit too profit driven. They're not really taking the kind of risks that they used to take. They're not leaning on the what their core PC fan base wants, because they can make more money going in a different direction, and I understand that. It makes total sense. But what comes out when you make those compromises is less than we expect from the Diablo franchise. So this is a fun project where we don't have any restrictions. We're just going for it. So in that sense, let's make some skill icons that are bold, that I would just be like over the moon to see in a game. If this launched full screen, I want to see that interface and just be like, hell yeah, hell yeah. All right, so we may actually have a use for this gem arch now. Really like how that looks there. And it's not really exactly how it ends up being, but we do keep it there for the time being. I think even in its current state, that's where the gem arch is. It is a pretty bold visual element. Like, it shouldn't, I think, if you told me without looking at it that this is where we were going to put it, I'd say probably too rich a design element to function there. Probably drawing too much attention to that area, but I actually think in practice it looks good, and so we leave it there for now. It is a bit bold. All right, and we're done for this video. That was a good, interesting place to stop, and it's always good to stop somewhere where you're excited to work on it the next day, and that's really a good example of that. We got the gem arch over the skill area, and really excited to continue working on it. Thanks for watching this one. I will see you next time. Everyone have a great day.